It's now my pleasure to introduce Jeffrey Bonner, who is the president and CEO of the St. Louis Zoo. And he is also past chair of the AZA and recently chaired the Amphibian ARC, the International Species Information System, the Madagascar Fauna Group. He served on the board of the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums and currently serves on several boards of Conservation Breeding Specialist Group. Dr. Bonner received his PhD from Columbia University, is a Burgess Fellow, Training Fellow, Fulbright Scholar, President's Fellow. Dr. Bonner is the author of numerous articles and books, including Sailing with Noah, Stories from the World of Zoos. Dr. Bonner.
Thank you so much. I was going to race through this anyway, and now on the basis of what I heard, I have to go even faster so I can add my own comments to the end of this. But as we look at my presentation, at least what I want to talk about is the role of zoos as conservation organizations into the future, and I'm going to focus largely on collections. So I do want to get us on a trajectory here, moving from the past, or from the present into the short term, and then 100 years from now. So where are we? How did we get here? Some of the great thinkers of the zoo world got together in 1984, including Dr. Conway. And at the time, we knew that the Ice Age was coming, that it was going to get colder, that we were going to lose the tropics, that we might have to save as many as 2,000 megavertebrates. But fortunately, new technologies would come in. So the long-term future, we were going to be able to preserve those species. We started at 200 years, 90% variability in terms of received genetics. We lowered that to 100 years, but we keep moving it forward by 1 year, okay? So essentially, it's infinite. How are we doing with that? Well, red are animals that are not sustainable. Yellow, we're close to sustainable, and green are sustainable by that definition, okay? 100 years from now, moving into infinity. You can look at that glass as being half full or half empty. That's up to you. However, we're focusing on species of least concern at the current time, and that's what this graph shows. The highest number there is species of least concern. The lowest number, 5, extinct in the wild, and data deficient means basically extinct in the wild. We have two issues then that we're dealing with. One is sustainability out into the future. The other is availability. As it happens, they're interlinked for many of the same reasons. First off, we're dealing with small populations. Stochastic effects can be devastating on those populations, disease, for example. We're learning a lot about reproductive issues, and frankly, in terms of our ability to plan, we're not doing as well as we should be doing. Witness the fact that we have too many species of least concern. So we started off basically this whole program with SSPs on the wrong assumption. It's not getting colder, it's getting warmer. We've had some very unfortunate outcomes, and we've had some fabulous successes, some tremendous outcomes. So what does that mean for the size and shape of zoos? Well, obviously size matters, but that's taxa dependent. You look at many mammals, not all mammals, but many mammals, you'll find that you need a large amount of space. And if you look at insects, for example, or many amphibians, you're going to find you need lesser space. I thought I'd just throw cheetah up here because it's not immediately intuitive that you need a lot of space for cheetah. It turns out that they're relatively expensive to maintain and require an adequate infrastructure. But if you look here, it's a classic case in point. The blue line is the ideal SSP population for cheetah. The green line is what's going to happen if we continue where we are. And basically it says 50 years from now we won't have cheetah. But there is a line in the middle, and that's these larger breeding centers. And so if you look at what breeding centers can do for cheetah, talking about the wilds or CRC, White Oak, what have you, another large AZA institutions, you'll find out that 91% of the cheetah production occurs in these very large facilities. So again, maybe a little counterintuitive. On the other hand, if you look at what's happening today in terms of smaller zoos, that picture at the top is St. Louis's Stream for Hellbenders. Very unimpressive, but it was the first institution, that was the first location where hellbenders were bred in the history of humans, at least in human care. Below it is a regular container. You see them all over ports in the United States. More in the United States, by the way, than any place else because all our goods come in and none go out. But as it happens, they're perfect for housing a species of frogs. Okay, the right size for 500 animals, say, which is a good number, easily portable. You can move them on boats, you can move them on trains, you can move them on semis. Wonderfully small footprint, and if you're really out of space, you can stack them. So in conclusion, where are we in terms of size and configurations in the present? We have some very large places, some very small places. We wish that all of them were more driven by top-down planning because we're not exactly focusing on the species that we should be. So 100 years from now, why have them? What will they be doing? Why have them? Well, I'm going to focus largely on collections and the expertise or the experience having those collections lend to us, and not so much on zoos as a galvanizing force for the public. Mention it once or twice. Why are these collections important as we look to the future? Well, there's some basic natural history that we just don't know. This is an Armenian viper. We study them in the St. Louis Zoo. We have a very large group of them, but we also study them in Armenia. Believe it or not, we can get radio transmitters in those guys. We were the ones that figured out how to get the antenna up their body. Reintroduction recently, bongo I think has been mentioned. Last year we did it, addax and Tunisia, unfortunately not in their home range. Of course, Wyoming toad. These are just things that St. Louis has been involved in. I'm particularly excited about this one when we look at the role of collections in terms of reintroduction. These are American burying beetles, and we're returning them to the wild in large numbers. But let's talk about for a second genetic augmentation. That's actually a St. Louis black and white rough lemur. They were reintroduced in Betampun, not because they're running out of lemurs, but because they're an island, okay? It's the top of a mountain, and so there's no gene flow in and out, and as a consequence, we had to augment it. By the way, all those lemurs reproduced. None of them lived as long as the ones that were born in Betampun. Two different things here, very different, preemptive breeding and translocations, but symbolized in this case by the same animal. This is a golden white-eyed saipan that lives at the St. Louis Zoo. Fish and Wildlife ask us to take them out of saipan and figure out how to breed the damn things before we lose them, okay? Because we know the brown tree snake is coming. We know they are going to be gone. At the same time, they asked us to move them to another island. So translocation, preemptive breeding, very different things. Head starting is something that we're doing a lot. That is a hellbender that actually lived in that stream I showed you earlier. We take a lot of the fertilized eggs out of the wild, reintroduce them in an attempt to beat back the chytrid fungus, which may be correlated with climate change, which I'll come back to. And finally, as you all know, zoos as a final refuge. The Guam kingfishers are gone in the wild. But what do having those collections really mean for us now and into the future? Well, I'll remind you that virtually everything we know about wildlife, disease, and medicine was discovered in zoos. It wasn't in universities. This is a great place. You're not learning anything about wildlife, disease, and medicine. It wasn't, by the way, learned in the wild either. It's just a little hard to do diachronic studies on animals in the wild for obvious reasons. We're looking more and more at zoonotic diseases. Why should you care? 75% of the things that make you sick make other animals sick as well. And where the newer novel disease is going to come from, SARS, HIV, avian influenza, monkeypox, whatever it is, they're coming from wild populations. You better be worried about that. It was in zoos that we discovered how to manage small populations in terms of their genetics. John Ballou and others pioneering that effort. Of course, we learned more about nutrition. Endocrine studies, I could go on and on. Endocrine studies are particularly important for reproductive studies, as you can see there. And of course, we are, and I suppose will be into the immediate future, a galvanizing force for the public. So, what are we going to be doing 100 years from now? Well, in order to understand what's going to happen 100 years from now, you've got to look at three fundamental issues, and I think global climate change is the only one that counts. David mentioned the role of geologists. That role is gone. Okay, we're not in the Holocene anymore, folks. We're in the Anthropocene. We're the people that shape this planet. And I think that zoos, in turn, have to respond. Ron and I were recently up in Churchill. Look at what's happening here in this broad landscape. When we were up there, there was supposed to be sea ice in the Hudson Bay. There was none. Okay, it's too warm. And bears are starving as a consequence. Local variations, same thing. If you're a species that lives on a mountain in a micro environment, in a specific habitat, as it gets warmer, you don't have any problem. You just keep moving up the mountain. You don't have a problem until you run out of mountain. So locally and more landscape level, and we're not going to be able to cope with this very well. Because as in our hemisphere, warm climates move to the north, they're going to find a very difficult time doing it because there's a terrible lack of corridors as we look even where I'm most happy, which is in the Adirondack Parks. Animals move pretty quickly. Plants, not so much, right? And I want to talk about issues, and I'm going to just focus real quickly on Yellowstone Park. It's one example. I could give you 1,000. Yellowstone, what's happening? Warm winters, more mountain pine beetles, less whitebark pines. Whitebark pines produce these beautiful cones that are full of these edible things that are almost like nuts. No nuts, fewer bears, and fewer birds like nutcrackers, fewer small mammals like squirrels. And so in Yellowstone Park, what do you have? A top-down problem and a bottom-up problem in a localized area. All because of this. It's getting warmer in Yellowstone Park. And why did I pick this example? Because 100 years from now, we might come back to this one and say, gee, that was the turning point. That's when the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said, Fish and Wildlife, you have to put those bears back on the list. Why? Because of global climate change. And that's why that has to happen. And that's a seminal court decision. So what are we going to be doing? Well, yeah, it is the same damn thing. We're going to be using, in the face of global climate change, we're going to be reintroducing species. We're going to be doing a lot of genetic augmentation as you find more and more isolated microhabitat species. Translocation is going to be big business for the zoos of the future, head starting and tragically final refuge, because we're going to run, it's been said by so many panelists, out of space. We're going to have to use the experience and the expertise that we're developing now to facilitate that in the future. So there's going to be more disease. That's what happens when you stress animal populations. You all know that. There's going to be small populations. We're going to have to manage them genetically. There's going to be a crisis in terms of flora and other smaller species when you look at the food chain. And we're going to have to tell people about this and have to do it a lot better than we're doing it now. How are they going to look? Well, the same, but fundamentally different. You're going to have landscape-scale breeding centers, and we've already alluded to the fact that, frankly, the Kruger is just a big park. It's just a big zoo. It's a zoo that may become, and it indeed is becoming, as Dr. Conway knows, an extractive reserve. He pioneered that notion. It's going to move down to areas like the wilds or what we have represented with Don and the CRC. And so we're going to find a scale moving down, but starting at one assumes a fairly large level. We're also going to find more specialized species. We're going to see more specimens in zoos because they're not going to be out there, and certainly a greater number of species. We're going to have to shift our interpretation, and we're going to need more of all of that. So it's partly about size, it's partly about how we use it, but it's mostly about what's happening out there that's driving what we're doing here. And I think I have 2 minutes left. David began his talk with a sentence about the loss of biodiversity, and then began to focus on issues of concern today, and undoubtedly issues of concern in the immediate future. I want to remind you of two things, and they're the two things that you need to be very skeptical about as you listen to us. And one of them is that you're going to see a lot of smooth curves, okay? Smooth curves in population growth, so on and so forth. The one thing I promise you is that civilizations do this. They rise and fall. There's nothing smooth about what happens with us as a society during the Anthropocene. The second thing, and scientists are guilty of this one, they show global climate change as a smooth curve. Let me tell you something, it is not, okay? It does this. It may trend one way, but it's not going to go smoothly. Witness the weather over the last 3 months. Okay, you're seeing a little bit of that. And what's that going to mean for us? Well, it's going to mean that civilization is going to change radically. There probably is, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm just going to assume, the biomass of fish in our oceans is probably less than the biomass of people on this planet. So if you think that we're going to have a sustainable future, I think you're mad, simply mad. We've talked here about a spectrum. Our panelists have talked about a spectrum with the Jetsons at one end and Blade Runner at the other. Let me challenge you to look at the world as a triangle. With those two, that's fine, and with the Dark Ages as the other point of that triangle, and then ask you to place a dot someplace. And you could place it at the Jetsons or Blade Runner. Frankly, folks, we're probably going to be more toward the Dark Ages. That's my prediction, and that's why I see zoos playing a vital role in fighting a rearguard action against what's going to be a tragically devastated planet. Thank you.